My name is Ruth. I am 57 years old. For 29 years, my greatest pride was being a mother to my son, Jeremy. I believed our bond was unbreakable, forged through years of just the two of us against the world. That belief carried me all the way to the manicured lawn of the Willow Creek Manor, my heart swollen with a joy so profound, it ached. I was about to see my boy get married. I never imagined the first words he would say to me there would be, "You need to leave. You are not invited." Before I tell you how a mother's love can be stretched to its absolute limit, I'm curious about the journey that brought you here today. Are you listening from a cozy kitchen somewhere? Or maybe during your commute? Wherever you are, I'd love it if you could share that with me in the comments below. And if you're ready to walk with me through this story of quiet strength, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support means more than you know. The foundation of my life with Jeremy was built on a quiet kind of toughness. His father, David, was killed by a drunk driver when Jeremy was just 4 years old. One minute, I had a partner, a future, a family. The next, I was a widow with a preschooler and a crushing silence in our home. I had to become both mother and father comforter, and disciplinarian dreamer and pragmatist. I worked as a paralegal for a small firm, and I took on every extra hour they would give me. I remember the feeling of my nylons at the end of a double shift, like they were the only thing holding my legs together. I would come home to a little boy who had been with Mrs. Henderson from next door, his small face always lighting up when I walked in. We had a ritual. I would make us grilled cheese sandwiches, and we would eat them at the Formica kitchen table, the one David and I bought at a yard sale. Jeremy would tell me about his day, his words tumbling out in a rush, and I would listen, my exhaustion momentarily forgotten. One night, he put his small, sticky hand on mine. He looked at me with those serious blue eyes, so much like his father's, and he said, "Do not worry, Mommy. When I grow up, I will take care of you. I will buy you a big house." I hugged him so tight, smelling the peanut butter in his hair, and I believed him with my whole shattered heart. That promise became the cornerstone of our lives. Every sacrifice was worth it for that boy. I wore the same winter coat for 7 years so he could have new sneakers for basketball. I put off going back to school for my own degree so I could be home when he got out of school. Our world was small, just the two of us, but it was full of library books and board games and the sound of his laughter. He was a sweet, sensitive child who felt things deeply. In high school, he became more withdrawn, which I chalked up to teenage angst. He was bright, and he worked hard, and when he got accepted to a good business school 3 states away, I felt a pride so fierce it brought tears to my eyes. That was my boy. That was our victory. But that was also when the first hairline cracks began to appear. It was subtle at first. He came home for Thanksgiving his freshman year, and I went to pick him up from the airport. I was so excited, I had baked his favorite cookies. When he walked out of the terminal, he looked taller, different. He gave me a quick hug, his eyes scanning the crowded pickup area. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice lower. "Can we, go? I think my friends from here are getting picked up over there." He nodded toward a group of kids loading luggage into a shiny SUV. I just did not want to have to do a whole big thing, you know. A whole big thing. Meaning me. Meaning his mother in her 8-year-old sedan wanting to hug him. I swallowed the little hurt and smiled. "Of course, honey. Let's go home." The visits became less frequent. His calls were shorter, more about logistics than conversation. He started dating Elena in his senior year. He brought her home for a weekend that summer, and I knew immediately that I was being assessed. Elena was polished from Greenwich, Connecticut. She had a way of looking at our modest 3-bedroom ranch house, at my collection of ceramic chickens on the kitchen windowsill, at my well-worn sofa that was not unkind, just utterly blank, as if she was cataloging items in a museum of a bygone era. She was perfectly polite. "Ruth, this salad is delightful," she would say, picking at the lettuce with her fork. "Jeremy told me you were a wonderful cook." It sounded like a line from a manual. During that visit over a dinner where I had used my good dishes, Elena gently steered the conversation toward the future. "Jeremy and I are thinking about a spring wedding," she said, her smile bright and unwavering. "Something small, elegant, intimate. Just family and very close friends." Jeremy kept his eyes on his plate, pushing his food around. I felt a cold trickle of dread. I was not sure I would qualify as either family or a close friend in this new definition. The real shift came 6 months before the wedding. Jeremy called me, and his voice was strained, almost panicked. "Mom, I do not know what to do. Elena has her heart set on Willow Creek Manor. It is this historic estate venue. Her parents took us there for a tasting, and it is everything. But the deposit alone is $25,000. Her parents are contributing, but they said the groom's family traditionally covers the venue and catering. I have my student loans and my new job. His voice broke. He sounded like the little boy who used to cry when he skinned his knee. The little boy who promised to take care of me. My heart ached for him. In that moment, I saw not the distant young man embarrassed by his past, but my child in distress. And I had a secret. All those years of frugality, of investing my small bonuses, of finally selling the family home when Jeremy left for college and moving into a cozy condo had left me with a nest egg that was frankly substantial. It was my security, my quiet pride. It was the money that was supposed to mean I would never be a burden. I took a deep breath. "Jeremy, listen to me. I want to give you your wedding as my gift. I will cover it, all of it." There was a stunned silence on the other end. "Mom, you cannot. That is too much." "I can, and I will," I said, my voice firming with decision. "But there is one condition. This stays between us. You do not tell Elena. You do not tell her parents. No one. You can say you got a bonus or that you had some investments come through. I do not care what story you tell, but my money does not come with any strings attached to their opinions of me. This is for you, to start your life without this stress." He was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "Thank you, Mom. Thank you so much. You have no idea. I love you." We set it up simply. We still had an old joint checking account from his college days for emergencies. I transferred a large sum into it. He would use that account for all the wedding expenses. I trusted him. He was my son. The silence after the money transferred was deafening. It was as if the financial transaction had completed an emotional one in reverse. The grateful calls stopped. My texts about how the planning was going went unanswered for days. When I did reach him, he was always distracted busy. "Oh, you know, Mom, it is just crazy with all the details. Elena's mom is really taking the lead. I will send you an invitation as soon as they are printed." It was always they, not I. The invitation arrived 4 weeks before the wedding. It was heavy cream-colored, engraved with elegant script. It was addressed solely to me, Ms. Ruth Ann Miller. There was no +1, which was fine, I did not want one. But there was also no handwritten note, no little heart drawn by my son. It was cold, official. It felt less like an invitation and more like a summons. I held it in my hands, sitting at my kitchen table, and I felt the first real pang of fear. This was not my boy. This was someone else's production. But I brushed it aside. I was being sensitive. This was his big day. I would be there, and when he saw me, he would remember. He would remember us. The week before the wedding was the longest of my life. I called Jeremy to ask about timings, about what color the mothers were wearing, about anything, just to hear his voice and feel connected. He never picked up. His text replies were masterpieces of evasion. "Do not worry about a thing, Mom. Everything is under control. Just show up at 4. I tried to tell myself this was normal pre-wedding jitters, that he was overwhelmed. I went shopping for a dress. I wanted something beautiful, something that would make me look like I belonged in the world of Willow Creek Manor. I found it in a department store, a lavender chiffon sheath with a matching jacket. It was more money than I had ever spent on a single item of clothing, but I did not care. I bought new shoes. I had my hair done. I wanted to be perfect for him. The morning of the wedding, I woke up at dawn. My condo was so quiet. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching the sky lighten. I pulled out the old photo albums, the ones with the sticky pages and the fading pictures. There was Jeremy at 5, missing his 2 front teeth, holding up a trophy from a soccer league where every kid got one. There he was at 13, all awkward limbs and a too big baseball cap. There we were, at his high school graduation, my arm around him, both of us squinting into the sun. My eyes filled with tears, but they were happy tears, nostalgic tears. Today was the culmination of all those yesterdays. I got ready slowly with care. I put on the dress and looked at myself in the full-length mirror. I looked nice, elegant even. I fastened the necklace David had given me for our first wedding anniversary, a simple silver chain with a small teardrop-shaped pearl. It was my talisman, my link to the man who had given me this beautiful son. I took a deep breath. Today was a good day. The drive to Willow Creek Manor was about an hour and a half. I left early, wanting to savor the journey. I rolled the windows down, letting the late spring air fill the car. I passed fields dotted with wildflowers, old barns, little towns with their flags flying. It was a beautiful, peaceful drive. I thought about David, wishing he could be here. I talked to him in my head the way I often did. Our boy is getting married today, I told him. Can you believe it? I played old love songs on the radio and sang along my heart, feeling lighter with every mile. As I got closer, the landscape changed. The fields became larger, more manicured. The houses sat farther back from the road behind long driveways and imposing gates. I followed the GPS instructions, turning onto a narrow tree-lined lane that announced private road. Willow Creek Estate. My palms began to feel a little damp on the steering wheel, and then I saw it. The manor. It was a colossal white colonial revival mansion with towering columns and rows of gleaming windows. Immaculate green lawns swept down to a serene pond dotted with lily pads. A graceful willow tree, the namesake, wept artistically by the water's edge. Tents were set up on the lawn, and I could see staff in black and white uniforms moving with purposeful efficiency. A string quartet was tuning up under a gazebo. It was a scene from a magazine. It was breathtaking, and it was utterly, completely alien to me. I pulled up to the front circular drive where a young valet in a red jacket stood. He opened my car door with a professional smile. "Welcome to Willow Creek Manor, ma'am." "Thank you," I said, smoothing my dress as I stood. "May I have your name for the guest list?" he asked. "Ruth Miller," I said. "I am the mother of the groom." His smile flickered just for a fraction of a second. His eyes darted toward the main entrance. "Of course. Please proceed to the check-in table just inside." I walked up the wide stone steps, my new shoes clicking softly. The grand double doors were open. Inside, a woman in a sleek navy dress sat at an elegant table with a large leather-bound book. A few other guests, women in extravagant hats and men in morning coats, were milling about holding flutes of champagne. I felt a wave of self-consciousness. My lavender dress suddenly felt too bright, too simple. I approached the table. The woman looked up, her smile brilliant and impersonal. "Good afternoon. Your name?" "Ruth Miller," I said again, forcing my voice to stay even. She ran a perfectly manicured finger down the list in the book. She went slowly. Then she went back to the top and went down again more slowly. Her smile became fixed. "I am sorry. Could you spell that for me?" "RUTHMILLER. said my heart beginning to thump a slow, heavy rhythm in my chest. She scanned the list once more, then looked up at me, her politeness now tinged with genuine confusion and a hint of alarm. I am so sorry, Ms. Miller. I do not seem to have you on our list for the main ceremony. Perhaps you are on the reception-only list. Let me check the other book. I am the mother of the groom, I repeated, and this time I heard the slight tremor in my own voice. Her eyes widened. Oh dear. One moment, please. Let me find the wedding coordinator. Or perhaps the groom. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping on the marble floor, and hurried away through a side door, leaving me standing there. I was exposed. I could feel the glances of the other guests, their polite curiosity turning to mild interest. I clutched my small gift bag, a silver picture frame for their wedding photo. I tried to stand tall to look like I belonged. Inside, a cold knot was tightening in my stomach. This was not a mistake. The valet's look, the missing name, this was intentional, but my mind refused to accept it. There had to be an explanation. Jeremy would clear this up. Any second now, he would come bursting through that door smiling and take my arm. Any second. The side door opened again, but it was not the coordinator who emerged. It was Jeremy. My breath caught. He looked so handsome in his tailored tuxedo. His hair was perfectly styled, his face clean-shaven. He was the image of a storybook groom. But his expression was all wrong. There was no joy, no surprise, no warmth. Instead, his face was a tight mask of intense anxiety. His eyes scanned the foyer, landed on me, and instead of lighting up, they filled with something like panic and then a hardened resolve. He walked toward me, not with open arms, but with quick, stiff steps, as if heading into a business negotiation he dreaded. A smile broke out on my face anyway, a reflex of love and relief. Jeremy, honey, you look so handsome. I am so happy for you. I took a step forward, my arms opening slightly for a hug. He stopped a few feet away, well out of hugging range. Mom. His voice was low, urgent, meant only for me. What are you doing here? The question was so absurd, so cruel, that for a moment I just stared at him. I came for your wedding, Jeremy. My invitation is right here in my purse. I fumbled with my clutch, my fingers suddenly numb. No, Mom, listen. He glanced over his shoulder toward the garden where the ceremony was to be held. You should not be here. What are you talking about? I whispered, the world beginning to tilt. I am your mother. It is complicated, he hissed, leaning in slightly. Elena's family, they have certain expectations. This whole event, it has to be a certain way. He struggled for the word. Your presence, it is not part of the plan. Elena was very clear. The words landed like physical blows. Not part of the plan. My presence. I looked past him, and there, standing in the shadow of the grand staircase, was Elena. She was already in her wedding gown, a vision of silk and lace. She was not smiling. She was watching us with a cold, detached expression, like a scientist observing an unsatisfactory experiment. In that instant, I saw it all. This was not a last-minute decision made by a stressed groom. This was a calculated exclusion agreed upon planned. The impersonal invitation, the silenced phone, the missing name on the list. They had never intended for me to be here. I was a flaw in their perfect picture, a piece of his past that did not fit the glossy narrative of their future. A terrible, silent understanding passed between my son and me. He saw that I knew, and instead of shame, his face hardened further. He had made his choice. You need to leave, he said, his voice now flat and final. You are not invited. Not really. Please just go. Do not make a scene. I will call you tomorrow." The sound of the string quartet starting a gentle classical piece filtered in from the garden. The laughter of guests, the clink of glasses. It all became a distant, mocking soundtrack. I looked at the man in front of me. I searched his face for any trace of the little boy who promised to take care of me, for the young man who had cried to me on the phone about the deposit. I saw only a stranger dressed for a role in a play where I had no part. The pain was so vast, so absolute, that it froze me. It locked my voice, my tears, everything in a block of pure shock, filled ice. All the fight, all the years of struggling and arguing and loving drained out of me in that instant. "I see," I said. My voice was quiet, calm, utterly empty. I turned around. I did not look back at him or at Elena. I walked away from the check-in table past the valet, who now would not meet my eyes, back out into the bright, mocking sunshine. I walked to my car, which was now parked off to the side. The valet had not even bothered to take it to the lot. I got in. I placed the gift bag, the silver picture frame, carefully on the passenger seat. I started the engine, and I drove away from my son's wedding. The drive home was the opposite of the journey there. The silence in the car was a physical presence, thick and suffocating. I did not turn on the radio. I did not cry. I just drove my hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel, my eyes fixed on the road ahead, but seeing nothing. The beautiful countryside was now just a blur of green. The numbness held a merciful anesthetic against the horror that was waiting to surface. I was in a state of profound shock, operating on autopilot. The only thought that circled in the frozen emptiness was a simple, devastating refrain. My son told me to leave. I arrived back at my condo as the late afternoon sun was slanting through the living room windows. The silence here was different. It was my silence in my space. It felt accusing. I stepped out of my new shoes, leaving them by the door. I unclasped David's pearl necklace and laid it gently on the hall table. Then I went to my bedroom and took off the beautiful lavender dress. I folded it neatly, feeling the expensive chiffon between my fingers, and placed it on the bed. I put on my oldest, softest cotton robe. I felt foolish standing there in my robe, a woman who had dressed for a party she was never meant to attend. I walked to the kitchen, the heart of every home I had ever made. I put the kettle on for tea, a lifelong habit for comfort. As I waited for it to boil, I leaned against the counter and let the first wave of reality crash over me. It was not just rejection. It was erasure. They had not just asked me to leave a party. They had attempted to delete me from the story of his life on one of its most important pages. And he had let them. He had been the one to say the words. The pain was no longer numb. It was a deep, seismic ache that started in my chest and radiated out to my fingertips. I hugged myself, trying to hold my body together. Then my eyes landed on the calendar hanging by the phone. The date was circled in red. Jeremy and Elena's wedding. And below it, in my own handwriting, were the words, 4 p.m., Willow Creek. All paid. All paid? The two words struck me like a bolt of lightning. A sudden, sharp, and lucid anger cut through the fog of grief. All paid. By me. I had funded this. I had paid for the venue that I was deemed unfit to enter. I had paid for the food I would not taste, the music I would not hear, the flowers I would not see. My life's work, my careful savings, my security. It was at this very moment underwriting my own profound humiliation. The anger was cold, clear, and focused. This was no longer just about hurt feelings. This was about justice, about a fundamental breach of contract. I had not given a gift. I had been robbed. My paralegal mind, trained for decades in logic and procedure, snapped into gear. This was not about emotion now. This was about action. I had the right to rescind a gift obtained under false pretenses. The pretenses were that I would be a welcomed guest at my son's wedding. That condition had been violently, publicly shattered. I went to my home office, a small nook with a desk and my computer. My hands were steady. I logged into my online banking. I navigated to the statements for the old joint account, the one I had funded. The transactions were all there, line by line, a ledger of my love being converted into their perfect day. A 5-figure deposit to Willow Creek Manor. 4 figures to Le Jardin Florists. Another large sum to Epicurean Delights Catering. A deposit for the Silver Strings Quartet. It was Saturday. The wedding was underway, but vendors often had final payments due upon completion of service or charges that would process on Monday. There was still time. I found the wedding planning folder. Months ago, when Jeremy had been briefly including me, he had emailed me a draft itinerary with all the vendor contact information just in case. I had printed it and filed it away, just in case. The irony was so bitter, it made my mouth taste like metal. I picked up my phone. My voice when I spoke did not sound like my own. It was calm, professional, and carried an authority that came from a deep, unshakable conviction of being wronged. My first call was to Willow Creek Manor. I asked for the events manager. When a woman named Samantha came on the line, I did not introduce myself as Ruth Miller, mother of the groom. I said, "My name is Ruth Miller. I am the primary funder on account number ending in 4512, which was used to pay the deposit for the Jeremy Miller and Elena Ross wedding today. There has been a significant breach of agreement. I am instructing you to cancel all services for that event effective immediately. Any further charges to that account are unauthorized and will be formally disputed. You can verify my authority with the transaction reference number." I read it off from my screen. Samantha was flustered. "But the ceremony has started. The guests are here." "That is not my concern," I said, my voice like steel. "The funding for this event has been withdrawn. You may seek payment from the couple or the Ross family directly, but you will not receive another cent from the account you were given. Do you understand?" She stammered an understanding. I made the same call to the caterer, then the florist, then the band leader. With each call, my resolve hardened. I was not a hysterical mother. I was a client revoking payment due to non-performance of contracted terms, the term being my inclusion. To them, it was a financial dispute. That was all they needed to know. Finally, I logged back into the bank. I initiated stop payment orders on every single check and transfer associated with that account that was still pending. Then I transferred every remaining dollar, over $15,000, that was meant for incidentals and final tips back into my private savings account. With a few clicks, I closed the joint account entirely. It no longer existed. The entire process, from the first phone call to the final click, took almost exactly 2 hours. 2 hours after I had been told to leave, the financial architecture of the wedding I had built began to implode. I sat back in my chair. I did not feel triumph. I did not feel joy. I felt a vast, hollow emptiness, but at the very bottom of it, there was a small, hard nugget of something new: control. I had been passive for so long, accepting the slights, making excuses, bending over backwards. No more. I had just drawn a line in the sand, with the only language left that they seemed to understand: money. And I had taken my resources back. I turned off my phone. I knew a storm was coming, but for the first time in years, I was the one standing in the eye of it, centered and still. I was no longer waiting for the phone to ring with an apology. I had just sent my own unmistakable message. I spent the rest of that Saturday in a state of purposeful quiet. I did not turn my phone back on. I knew what was happening, or at least I could imagine it. The mental images were both painful and perversely satisfying. I pictured the string quartet being quietly approached by a manager, mid-song, their music trailing off into confusion. I saw waitstaff beginning to clear the cocktail hour tables far too early, the past appetizers disappearing. I envisioned a furious whispered conference between Jeremy Elena and a red-faced venue manager near the willow tree. Elena's perfect composure shattered Jeremy's face pale with a dawning horrible understanding. The beautiful, seamless day they had curated was unraveling stitch by stitch, and the bill for their exclusion was coming due in real time. I needed to be away from the walls of my condo. I drove to the state park a half-hour away, the one with the long, looping trail around a lake. I walked for miles, my sensible sneakers on the dirt path. I let the rhythm of my steps and the sound of the wind in the pine trees absorb the shockwaves still echoing inside me. I cried then, finally, great heaving sobs that came from a place so deep and old, I did not know I could access it. I cried for the little boy who was gone. I cried for the years of struggle. I cried for the profound loneliness of being discarded by my own flesh and blood. The forest held my grief without judgment. I returned home as night fell exhausted, but somehow cleansed. I slept a deep, dreamless sleep. The kind of sleep that comes after a long battle win or lose. On Sunday morning, I made a pot of strong coffee. I braced myself and I turned my phone on. It exploded with notifications. Dozens of missed calls. From Jeremy. From numbers I did not recognize, likely Elena or her parents. Voicemails stacked up. I played the first one from Jeremy sent last night. It was a chaos of anger and panic. "Mom, what the hell is going on? The caterer is saying the payment is invalid. The venue manager is talking about calling the police. Did you do something? Call me back now." The later ones descended into pure rage. "You ruined everything. Do you have any idea what you've done?" Elena is hysterical. Her parents are talking about lawsuits. How could you be so selfish? Then around midnight, the tone shifted to pleading. "Mom, please, you have to fix this. You have to call them and tell them it was a mistake. Please, I am begging you." I deleted them all without finishing. I felt a distant pity, but it was buried under layers of bedrock resolve. I was washing my coffee cup when I heard the squeal of tires in my driveway. A car door slammed. Heavy, frantic footsteps pounded up my walkway. The doorbell rang, then immediately turned into a violent pounding. "Ruth." "Mom. Open this door. I know you're in there." I took a deep breath, dried my hands on a dish towel, and walked to the front door. I did not open it immediately. I looked through the peephole. Jeremy stood there still in the rumpled clothes from yesterday, his hair disheveled, his face ravaged by anger and lack of sleep. He looked like a lost little boy, but one filled with a man's fury. I unlocked the door and opened it. I did not open the screen door. I stood there in my jeans and a simple sweater, a world away from the woman in the lavender dress. He stared at me, his chest heaving. "What did you do?" he screamed, his voice raw. "You ruined everything. The wedding. It was a complete disaster. The food stopped. The music stopped. They started packing up the flowers. They were all looking at me. Elena's parents had to write a check for thousands on the spot. They're all blaming me." I looked at him, my expression calm. "Yes," I said. "I canceled the payments." He gaped at me as if the words were in a foreign language. "You. How? Why would you do that to me? To us?" My voice was quiet, but it cut through his hysterics. "You asked me to leave Jeremy. You said I wasn't invited, so I left. And I took my gift with me. You do not get to use my money to build a life that has no room for me in it." The confusion on his face was almost comical. Then it slowly shifted as the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place for him. His eyes widened in a true stunned horror that had nothing to do with the public embarrassment and everything to do with a fundamental miscalculation. "It was you," he whispered, his voice suddenly small. The whole time, I said. Every last dime. The venue, the food, the flowers, the music, all of it. And you chose to use it to buy my exclusion. He took a step back, as if physically pushed. All the fight seemed to drain out of him, replaced by a dawning, terrible comprehension. He had not just insulted his mother. He had bitten the hand that was literally feeding his dream, and he had never even known it was her hand. He had treated the money as an anonymous resource, a lucky break, completely divorced from the person who had earned it and saved it. But it was a gift, he stammered weakly. A gift has strings of love, Jeremy, I said. Not chains of obligation, but it is still given freely. And it can be taken back when the love is thrown in the giver's face. The account is closed. The vendors will be looking to you and to Elena's family for the remainder. That is between you all now. His face cycled through emotions, shock, shame, a resurgence of anger. You humiliated me. You have no idea the pressure I was under Elena's family. They have standards, and I have self-respect, I said, cutting him off. Something you seem to have forgotten I taught you. The door is closed, Jeremy. On more than just this house. When you are ready to speak to the mother who raised you, and not the prop you wanted to hide, you know how to find me. But it will be on terms of mutual respect, not a checkbook. I looked at him for a long moment, this stranger who wore my son's face. I saw the ghost of the little boy in his bewildered eyes, and my heart broke all over again cleanly, finally. Goodbye, Jeremy. I closed the door. Not with a slam, but with a soft, definitive click. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood and listened. I heard a choked sob from the other side. I heard his footsteps slow and heavy now walk back to his car. I heard the engine start, and then the sound of him driving away. This time I did cry. I slid down to the floor and cried for what was lost, and for the terrifying empty space of what was to come. The weeks that followed were some of the darkest of my life. Darker, in some ways, than after David died. Then I had a purpose, a child to raise. Now the purpose was gone, and in its place was a gaping wound of betrayal. The grief was a physical weight. I would wake up in the morning, and for a split second, everything was normal. Then the memory would crash over me fresh and brutal, and I would have to force myself out of bed. I isolated myself. I could not bear the thought of well-meaning friends asking about the wedding. I knew Jeremy and Elena would have crafted a story, the unstable mother, the financial misunderstanding, something that painted them as victims. I did not have the energy to defend myself. My truth was too humiliating, too intimate to share. Through Maureen, an old friend from the law firm, who had heard whispers through the legal grapevine, I got snippets of the fallout. The wedding had ended in chaos and tears. Elena had called off the engagement entirely by the end of that weekend. Her family was indeed pursuing Jeremy for the funds they had to cover, threatening a civil suit. His new job at a prestigious firm was in jeopardy. The scandal fueled by the wealthy and connected Ross family was a stain he could not wash off. He was living in a temporary apartment alone. Part of me ached for him, the part that was still a mother. But a larger, harder part knew this was the direct consequence of his own choices. He had chosen a castle built on sand, and the tide had come in. My own healing had to be active. I could not just wait for the pain to pass. I had to build a new life, brick by brick. I started by using a small fraction of the money I had reclaimed. Not for anything practical, but for joy. Or at least for the pursuit of it. I booked a week-long trip to Maine, to a small inn on the coast I had always wanted to visit. I went alone. I ate lobster rolls at picnic tables overlooking the harbor. I read novels for hours in a rocking chair on a wraparound porch. I walked on rocky beaches and let the vast, indifferent Atlantic Ocean put my problems into perspective. I did not make friends. I was quiet. I was healing. Back home, I signed up for a pottery class at the community center. My first attempts were lopsided and collapsed, but I kept at it. There was a profound satisfaction in getting my hands dirty, in creating something tangible from a lump of clay. It was the opposite of the ephemeral social world Jeremy had tried to enter. It was messy and real and mine. I reached out to Maureen for lunch, and we began to meet regularly. She never pushed for details, just offered steady, pragmatic friendship. It was a relief. About 3 months after the wedding, a letter arrived in a plain white envelope with Jeremy's handwriting. My heart hammered as I opened it. It was not an apology. It was a bleak, factual update. He had lost his job. The lawsuit from the Ross family was moving forward. He was seeing a therapist. He was drowning in debt and regret. It was a cry for help dressed up as a status report. He was testing the waters, seeing if the maternal lifeline was still there. The old Ruth would have wired money immediately. The new Ruth sat at her kitchen table, the same table where we had eaten grilled cheese sandwiches, and she thought. She thought about enabling. She thought about responsibility. She thought about love that empowers versus love that infantilizes. I wrote him back. It was the hardest letter I have ever written. Dear Jeremy, I received your letter. I am sorry to hear you are struggling. The consequences of our actions are often harder than we anticipate. I want to be clear. I will not be sending you money. That chapter is closed. You are a capable, educated man, and you will find your way through this. Part of that way must be facing the financial and personal mess you have created without a bailout. My love for you is not conditional on your success or failure, but my involvement in your life is now conditional on mutual respect, honesty, and the acknowledgement of the pain you chose to cause. You need to understand that what you did was not just about a wedding day. It was about dismissing a lifetime. I am enclosing a photograph. I think you need to remember who we were. I am in therapy too. I am learning to live a life that is not defined by being your mother. I hope one day we can meet as two adults who have done their own work. But that day is not today. Take care of yourself, Mom. I enclosed a picture of him at age 7, sitting on my lap on our old sofa. Both of us laughing at something silly, our faces filled with uncomplicated joy. I mailed it and released the outcome. My life in the meantime was slowly taking shape. My condo was filled with my lopsided pottery creations. My calendar had my plans, not his. The silence once so oppressive was becoming peaceful. It was my silence. I was learning at 57 who Ruth Ann Miller was, when no one was watching, when no one needed her. It was terrifying, and it was liberating. Healing is not a straight line. It is a spiral. You circle back to the pain, but each time from a slightly higher vantage point with a little more strength, a little more understanding. The therapy helped immensely. It gave me language for what I had experienced, emotional betrayal, parentification in reverse, where the child expects the parent to have no needs, the importance of boundaries. My therapist told me something that changed my perspective. She said, Ruth, you did not just set a boundary with Jeremy. You enforced it. Most people struggle with the enforcement. You followed through, and at great personal cost. That is not cruelty. That is integrity. She was right. I began to reframe the entire story. I was not a vengeful mother who destroyed her son's wedding. I was a woman who, after a lifetime of giving, finally refused to fund her own disrespect. Canceling those payments was not an act of revenge. It was the first seismic act of self-respect in decades. It was me drawing a line in the sand and saying, my love for you ends here, where my dignity begins. The deepest lesson I learned was not about my son's failings, but about my own worth. I had spent so long defining myself through sacrifice, the good mother, the long-suffering widow. I confused sacrifice with love, and I thought unconditional love meant having no conditions at all, even for basic respect. I was wrong. Love should be a bridge between two whole people, not a plank you walk while the other person saws it off behind you. True love, whether for a child or anyone else, requires the preservation of the self. You cannot pour from an empty cup, and for years I had been letting mine be not just emptied, but kicked over. It has been a year now. There is no fairy tale ending. Jeremy and I are not reconciled, but we are in a kind of fragile, tentative communication. He calls me once a month. The calls are short, awkward. He talks about his new job, which is less glamorous but seems more stable. He is still in therapy. He has not apologized, not in the way I need to hear it, but he is showing up. He is not asking for anything. That in itself is a change. I am open to the possibility of a new relationship with him, but I am no longer waiting for it. My happiness is not held hostage by his progress. My life is full in its own quiet way. I have my pottery, my walks, my friendship with Maureen. I have peace. I have a self that is slowly, tentatively stretching into the space that was once entirely consumed by motherhood. To you listening to my story, I want to say this. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any other wound because it strikes at the core of who we are and where we belong. If you are facing something similar, whether it is a child, a parent, a sibling who has chosen to erase or diminish you, please know this. Your pain is valid. Your anger is justified. And your peace is worth protecting, even if protecting it means walking away, even if it means drawing a line that feels unthinkable. Sometimes the strongest love looks like a silent exit, and sometimes the most powerful gift you can ever take back is the one you gave from the deepest part of your heart, when the heart receiving it forgot that its value was not in the gift itself, but in the giver. Thank you for listening to my story. It means more than I can say to share this space with you. If this resonated with you, if you have ever had to set a difficult boundary with someone you love, I would be so grateful if you would share your own thoughts or experiences in the comments below. Let us support each other. And if you found strength in this journey, please like this video, subscribe to the channel for more stories of real-life resilience, and share it with someone who might need to hear this message today. You never know whose heart you might be helping to mend. Wishing you peace and the courage to protect it.